Hello everyone, my name is Gimmie. I'm here today with a simple goal to help you in the world of color and DaVinci Resolve. In today's episode, we're going to go over the color page in DaVinci Resolve, how to use it, what things do, and how the workflow operates. In DaVinci Resolve, the color page can be a bit overwhelming for newcomers, as the workflow is a bit different than your typical nonlinear editor. DaVinci Resolve works with nodes in a node tree, which I'll explain a bit more in detail later in this video. For now, I'm just going to give you a basic tour of where things are, what they do, and how to use them in the color page. I'm also not going to go over every single thing on the color page in this video because there's so much that the video would last over an hour. I'm only going to touch on the most important tools that you will use most often. Starting at the top, you can see we have a viewer window, or a canvas. This is the same as any other canvas and shows you the footage you're currently working with. To the right here, we have a little thumbnail window with some lines coming off of it. This is the first node in your node tree. I'll get more into detail on nodes in a little bit. Below these, you have a left to right list of every clip that you have in your timeline, in the order that they are placed in the timeline. The farthest to the left is your first clip, and the farthest to the right is your last. They are also numbered. You can see below these clips, there's a very small version of your timeline from over on the edit page. This is handy to tell you where you are in your timeline when you are working. You will also notice that in your canvas, you can only see the current clip that is on the top and not the one that is on the bottom. In a lot of cases, when acquiring a project from an editor, it is good practice to ask the editor to drop everything in the edit down to one track. The reason for this is there may be a clip below another clip that we cannot see and therefore cannot color. You can see here we have two clips, one on top of the other. In the canvas, I can see the top clip when selecting the bottom clip. Here it still displays the top clip. The only way around this is to go over to the edit page and start trimming clips. As a colorist, we want to avoid trimming or doing anything in the edit page that might change what the editor did. So, to save us from messing something up in the picture lock, we can ask the editor to drop everything down to one track. That way we can see everything we are working with. Below all of these are your color tools. This is where you're going to be spending most of your time while coloring footage. On the left we have our four primary wheels: lift, gamma, gain, and offset. You will notice these three dots above your wheels. These give you other tools to refine your grade even further. If we click the far right dot, we bring up a second set of wheels. These are very different than the first set. You can see now, instead of lift, gamma, gain, and offset, we have shadow, midtone, highlight, and offset. The main difference between these wheels is their respective areas they affect. To show you an example, let's switch back over to the first page with lift, gamma, gain, and offset. Let's grab the gain wheel and do something extreme so you can see the areas it affects. Let's put some extremely heavy greens on our image. You can see it affects the brighter portions of our image while slightly changing the darker parts. Now, let's undo that and see what doing the same thing on the other set of wheels does. Let's grab our highlights and again put on some very heavy greens. You can see the area it is affected is still the brighter portions of our image, but it's more restricted and doesn't bleed into our midtones at all. On the other page, the wheels bleed a little bit into the other areas of brightest, mid-range, and darkest. On the third page, the controls stay in their respective areas. Now, on the middle page, we have controls that work very similarly to the wheels, only these have sliders or individual channels of red, green, or blue for the lift, gamma, and gain. You can individually raise or lower a color channel in the area where you need based on what your scopes say. We will get into reading scopes a little later in this video. Moving over to the bottom middle, we have another area with controls. These are our curves. You have a list here of which areas you want to affect, such as hue versus saturation, hue versus hue, etc. These curves work by dragging lines in order to change the desired area. For example, here we have separate curves for RGB or red, green, blue. The bottom left is the darkest area of our image, and the top right are the brightest. You can see if I select our red curve, moving the line on the top will affect our reds only. Go below the line to reduce and above to add. Along with curves, we also have qualifier, window, tracker, blur, key, sizing, and 3D. I'll go over those in another video. On the far right, we have our scopes. There are many scopes. In this list here, you can see we have Parade, Waveform, Vectorscope, Histogram, and Cie Chromaticity. Scopes are a window into the values of colors in our image. If you are ever doubting your eyes or your monitor, then trust your scopes. They are always correct. If you right-click your image in the canvas, then click Show Scopes, you can bring up a window that shows you 4 scopes at once. You can change each scope individually to show which you prefer. Starting with the waveform, the way a waveform works, you can see the values of our entire image. The top of our scope denotes our highs and the bottom denotes our lows. You can tell if your image is clipping in either the highs or the lows because it will go beyond the boundaries of the scope. The top of the scope represents pure white and the bottom pure black. We want to avoid clipping beyond those lines because when your image clips, it loses data and it cannot be retrieved once lost. When working in broadcast, they have standards called broadcast safe, which represent the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows you can safely display without losing data. To give you an example, I'm going to raise my gain up on my image to a very high level so we lose some of that data. Now you can see here that once I have done that, we have a pure white with no detail at all. When someone tries to watch this, all they will see is pure white with no detail, and no one wants that. It works the same with blacks. You always want to stay in the safe zone, unless of course you're doing something creative and intentionally want to lose the data in that area. It's a good idea to crush your blacks a tiny bit in your projects if you have something that you want to be pure black, but don't go overboard with it. Using this waveform, we can tell if any part of our image is clipping, and adjust to fix any issues. As you can see in my image, I'm a little too bright in the blacks, so I can take my color wheels and bring it down a little bit to keep it within the broadcast range. The way a parade works is very similar to the waveform, only it's more like 3 waveforms separated, one for each of the 3 colors of RGB. RGB is how your display shows your image. With different combinations of red, green, and blue, we can achieve any color on the spectrum. So that's why you will see red, green, and blue controls a lot in DaVinci. Moving on to the histogram. It's similar to the waveform and the parade, only now we're working on a side-to-side rather than top-to-bottom. In the waveform and the parade, the top represents pure white, and the bottom represents pure black. In the histogram, the far right represents pure white, and the far left represents pure black. And now we have the Vectorscope. The Vectorscope is very different compared to the other scopes in that it doesn't represent any brightness levels. It only shows you color values. Imagine a color wheel placed on top of the Vectorscope, and it's invisible. Using the Vectorscope, we can tell where our image lies on the color wheel. Now, imagine an invisible line moving up and to the left or northwest if this were a compass. This line represents skin color. It doesn't matter the nationality of the person in your image. Every human falls on this line. The Vectorscope is a great tool to tell if your skin tones are following this lifeline, as I like to call it. You can see here if I qualify out our skin tones so that they're the only color in the image, our Vectorscope accurately changes to show us the colors in our image, and you can adjust your colors more to align with the lifeline. And last but not least, we have the Cie Chromaticity. Cie Chromaticity is named after the Cie 1931 color space, and it's the International Commission on Illumination. You can see here we have an outer line representing the entire color gamut. Then we have an inner triangle labeled Rec 709. This is because my project is set up to Rec 709, and it shows you where your colors fall inside the Rec 709 range. If we switch over to P3 DCI, which has a wider range, you can see the triangle gets larger. This is because P3 DCI is capable of displaying more colors than Rec. 709. This of course depends on your monitor as well. If you don't have a P3 monitor, then this setting will do you no good as you cannot even see the colors. You can see here, if I push the colors to an extreme level, they clip along the borders of the triangle, the same way our whites and blacks clipped in the other scopes. This is a great tool to tell if your colors are bordering clipping, risking losing data. Learning to read scopes is a very important step in becoming a better colorist, so I recommend learning them and viewing them on a regular basis. Now that we have a basic understanding of what some primary tools are, I can show you a little bit more about nodes and how they work. Here we have our first node for our image. Every image is automatically assigned one node to start. Then, moving left to right, you can see these connectors before and after my node. These represent a chain of command. Nodes that come after one another have the changes you already applied from the node before it. So adding nodes to our tree, we can come up here to Color, Node, Add Serial Node, or press Command S. Now that the serial node has been added, you can see we have two nodes in our tree. Remember that the node on the left comes before the node on the right, as we follow our line. Think of it like stacking sheets of paper, one on top of another. A serial node is just another in the line. Layer nodes are nodes that can be applied next to one another rather than on top of one another. So if you want to make some adjustments to two different areas of your image at the same time, you can. Now the way I set up my nodes for every clip is I make 3 serial nodes to start. The first node is for noise reduction if my image needs it. The second is for any brightness changes, and the third is for basic balancing. These 3 nodes are a good starting point for getting a corrected and decent looking image before you make any creative changes or grades. Any nodes you apply after the initial 3 are up to you. If my image happens to have a green screen that needs to be keyed out, I would use my 4th node for that. Since we're on the subject of keying, I'll show you how to add an alpha channel to your node tree in case you need it. You can see here that our nodes are connected by green lines. If we want an alpha channel, we need to add some different color lines to represent that. So right-click and choose Add Alpha Output. Now you can see here on the far right we have a new output below our original output. This represents the alpha channel. So in order for it to work, we need to add some connectors from our nodes that would have an alpha channel to this output. You can simply click and drag to connect. Now you can see that our image with the keyed out color has the alpha channel applied. That wraps up today's video, and I hope I was able to teach you something. If you have any questions, feel free to ask down in the comments section so I see them. Giving this video a like is always appreciated, and consider subscribing. And until the next video, have a great day.